The rain had just begun to fall, light droplets teasing the asphalt as flashing red and blue sliced through the early dusk. He stood motionless, drenched, not by the rain but by the humiliation steaming off his skin. Around him, murmurs grew, hushed gasps, phones raised, fingers trembling to capture a scene too wrong to ignore. Handcuffs bit into wrists that once held command over entire battalions. His breathing was steady, not out of peace, but control, the kind drilled into you when chaos is a familiar companion. The sergeant, young and puffed with power, leaned in, voice low and laced with superiority. "Next time," he hissed, "don't mouth off." That was the moment the general turned his eyes, not in fear or anger, but with the deep, unflinching stare of someone who had seen true war and found this pathetic theater beneath even contempt. But he said nothing. Not yet. From the corner of his eye, he caught a child watching, maybe 10, maybe 12 eyes wide, heartbreaking, witnessing a hero brought low by ignorance disguised in uniform. That, more than the cuffs, cut deep. He'd fought so children like that never had to see justice mocked this way. Inside the cruiser, silence hung thick. The rookie at the wheel avoided eye contact, knuckles wide against the steering wheel. He knew they'd made a mistake, but his training hadn't covered this. Hadn't prepared him for honor in chains, or the quiet dignity of a man who refused to scream. 10 minutes passed. 10 minutes of shame, suffocating beneath the false calm. The general closed his eyes and thought of his comrades, men and women who died on foreign soil wearing the same flag now pinned to the chest of those who failed to recognize their own. He thought of the Constitution he'd sworn to uphold, of the nights he'd stared into the abyss of war, never once flinching, of medals he never asked for, of the battles that weren't in deserts or jungles, but in courtrooms, boardrooms, and broken communities. When the car stopped, it wasn't at a precinct. It was under a bridge, shielded from view. The sergeant stepped out, slamming the door behind him. "Get him out," he barked. The rookie hesitated. That split-second pause, that twitch of conscience, would haunt him for the rest of his life. They pulled him out, not with the violence of earlier, but with something worse, the slow, deliberate intention of men trying to erase what they'd just done. The cuffs stayed on. The general stood tall. He'd always stood tall, even when bullets sang overhead, even when orders weighed heavy. "Who do you think you are?" the sergeant challenged, poking a finger into his chest. No answer. "You think you're better than me, huh?" Still silence. And then, slowly, the general lifted his hands, not to strike, not to beg, but to reach into his coat pocket, or tried to, until they remembered they'd bound his arms. "Check his pocket," the rookie said. Inside was a single phone. No passcode. Just one number saved as command line. The rookie, now trembling, handed it to the general. "Sierra broken bar, yeah, broken bar." The general nodded once. No words. He dialed. The voice on the other end answered on the first ring. The shift in atmosphere was instant. The sergeant stiffened. The rookie paled. Whatever was said on the other side, it wasn't loud, but it was enough. 12 minutes later, 3 unmarked black SUVs pulled up. Out stepped officials whose presence silenced everything. One nodded. The general didn't speak. He didn't need to. The cuffs were removed. Almost reverently, he didn't rub his wrists. He didn't glare. He simply walked past them. The sergeant called out, desperation now tainting his tone. "I didn't know her." But the general stopped, just for a second. "You didn't ask," he said, quietly. "That's worse." And then he walked away. What followed in the weeks to come would shatter a department. Internal reviews, public apologies, training protocols rewritten. The rookie turned whistleblower. The sergeant dismissed. But the general never gave interviews, never spoke to media. He didn't need the world's attention. He already had the respect of those who mattered, because the truth was, that phone call wasn't a threat. It was a mirror. One that showed a system what it had become, and what it should have been all along. At home, he sat in silence, watching shadows stretch across his living room. His uniform hung behind glass, medals glinting faintly in the fading light. Every inch of that fabric was earned, not gifted. Every scratch on those pins held stories only he truly knew. A loss, courage, duty. But none of that had protected him in those crucial minutes. Not the rank, not the service, not even the truth. His wife entered, placed a warm cup beside him. She didn't speak. She'd seen the footage like the rest of the world. The difference was, she knew the man behind the silence at the battles he'd never discuss, the names he still whispered in sleep. He finally spoke. They looked at me and saw something less. She nodded, her hand resting over his. They thought you were just another threat, she said. They never thought you were the man who kept them safe while they slept. The general took a deep breath. I didn't call them for revenge. I know, she said. I called so this won't happen to someone else. And with that, he stood. Later, when officials offered to honor him, he declined. I don't need applause, he said. I need accountability. He visited academies, not to condemn, but to teach. He stood before young cadets and told the story, not angrily, not bitterly, just honestly. And he watched as their faces changed. Some looked away, others met his gaze, ashamed. But a few nodded, determined. One cadet approached him after. See a broken bar that won't happen under my watch. He smiled faintly. Make sure of it. In a small town far from the incident, a mural was painted, not of the handcuffs, but of the moment he stood tall despite them. Beside him, a child watching. Beneath, the words, "True honor stands even in chains." It became a symbol, not of victimhood, but of resilience, of the strength it takes to rise above injustice without surrendering your soul. He never returned to that street. Didn't need to. His presence remained in every policy rewritten, every badge now worn with renewed awareness, every officer who learned to ask instead of assume. And the phone? It remained in his pocket, always, not as a weapon, as a reminder.